And welcome. We are on video number 3. We're continuing on with the standard breakdown, and we're on strand number 2, which is going to cover emergent literacy. So before we even go any further, emergent means beginning literacy. So we're not talking about our kids reading full-on books. Okay, I don't want anyone to think that your 5-year-old needs to be reading, that your 4-year-old needs to be reading, that your 3-year-old needs to be reading, that your 2-year-old needs to be reading. I think you get the point. We have this unrealistic expectation often, thinking that our kids are supposed to head off to kindergarten already reading. And that is not developmentally appropriate for our children. So I want to focus on that as we are getting into this portion here. Again, this is emergent literacy. So we are setting up the skills so that when they become developmentally ready, they are then able to become readers. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, just like the last video, make sure that you comment and share your thoughts on this particular video post, either during or at the end. I want you to consider some ways that you can encourage more literacy for the children that you're caring for. Okay, so again, here's our emergent literacy, and it covers 5 separate concepts. So we've got concepts of print, book handling skills, phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge, comprehension, and text structure. Notice that none of those concepts are reading. So, concept 1, concepts of print. So this is just the basic idea. The kid knows that print carries messages. And I had mentioned environmental literacy in the very first one, the very first video. And this is that literacy that's all around us in the world. Signs that we see driving down the road, or the way that a McDonald's is known across the world, just literally by a symbol anymore. I mean, yes, it is an M, but a child that can't read and doesn't know what a letter M is sure can find a McDonald's driving down the street. That's how much power environmental print has. It's one of the first things our kids start reading, actually. So again, you're probably going to notice that this sounds very similar, but our kids need these daily experiences with these materials. It's going to be a print-rich environment, and they're going to just start understanding and seeing this connection between spoken and written word. We want them to start learning what that print is used for, that it has a meaning, and that meaning tells us something, like signs, letters, menus, and again, that big golden M as we drive past it. So concepts of print has a couple of indicators, and again, it's about recognizing and identifying that environmental print, knowing that it's out there, and being aware of it. Understanding that it tells us something, and that it can be read, just like a book can be read. There's also knowing that letters come together to form words, and words come together to form, entire thoughts. And then also it's their ability to recognize their own name, and the names of friends and family, things like that. And again, that's one of the most important things, which I will talk about more in depth. All right, so here's some examples of that environmental print. Again, I encourage you to bring this into your environment and put it everywhere. Put it everywhere that it makes sense, obviously. So if you've got a kitchen, you should definitely have some grocery ads and, breakfast menu, things like that you can make on your computer, or you can just sort through your junk mail and get a good majority of these items. And you can also go to your pantry and pull out any box of food. Literally, It's everywhere. You want your children to do a hair salon? Bring out some empty shampoo bottles. They all have environmental print on them already. You don't even have to go out and buy it. Well, no, you do have to buy it. You just don't have to buy it specifically as a toy. Use what you got. All right, so we want our kids to have this wide variety of book topics to explore. Don't just think that you only need fiction stories, stories about the dragon and the princess. My kids love nonfiction, and I bring in books that are much higher level than what they actually can read or are supposed to be interested in. One of the books that I used in my 7th and 8th grade classroom was a reptile book, and it was like giant fold out reptiles, so you could see how big they were in life size, and the kids absolutely loved that book. These children here are reading books that they're about the human body, and they're flipping the little tabs. Now obviously these kids cannot actually read, but they are looking at that and they are understanding that it's giving them information, and they are understanding things from these books, even if the words themselves are too advanced. So definitely, when your kids show an interest in any topic, it's a great opportunity to embrace that and to use it to add to your environment things that they're interested in. So for example, you can see my girls are holding some beautiful little baby bunnies. One of our wonderful providers brought these over for my girls to fall in love with, and the girls of course became obsessed with bunnies. And while I am not willing to get a bunny of our own, I did start to incorporate their interest for rabbits into the books that we have. This is not our particular book basket, but it is just showing you like a variety of books that are also about rabbits. And lo and behold, they're going to be drawn to those things because they're interested in them. If kids are super excited about the human body, just like those earlier children were, you bring in human body books. If they're interested in cooking, give them some cookbooks. They don't have to be able to read it to enjoy it. All right, and if you don't know what your kids are interested in just yet, here's a topic we all love. And I'm super fond of this yellow book right here. I feel like some of you will recognize this maybe, but this was a book I was given as a child. I think my godparents had given this to me, and it was such a special book to me because I could actually I got to write in the book. So it's one of those things where it's like, my favorite food is, and then I try to write out, tacos or whatever, and it's all jibber jabber because of course I can't write yet. And I've got my drawings all over it. It's like, draw a picture of yourself and what color is my hair. And I just loved that book. I was obsessed with it. So, you don't have to go out and buy a book like this. You can make them with your children, obviously, like scrapbooks and picture books. I'm actually compiling a bunch of books of my girls' artwork, and it's one of the things that they love. If it's something that is special to them and was made by them or is about them, that's going to be a book that they're going to be drawn to. All right, so we got all these great books. What do we do with them? Well, we need to learn how to handle books appropriately. So I often, have to remind new children that I was caring for that we treat Miss Kelly's books with love and care. These are not things that we throw on the ground. We treat them like our babies, and they have a home, and we take them to their home, and when we're using them, we're very gentle. And that's because I'm a book nerd, but also because it's actually in the standards that children need to know how to do this. It's going to happen if you read every day. You can't expect kids to know how to handle these books and how to actually manipulate them without modeling that for them. So I mentioned in a previous video that you don't even really have to read the words of the book for it to be a powerful experience. It's really more about modeling the love of reading and modeling the how to. So I have a book and it's got a cover, and that cover tells me information, and then I open it, left to right, and then each page I go down the page from top to bottom. These are things that we kind of take for granted, but they are all actually standards that our kids are learning right now. So read all the books. The more books, the better. That's how I feel about it. Here's a good example of my children who are unable to read, reading books. Not a one of them can read, but here they are reading books appropriately. Now, here's a secret. These are like seek and find books, where it's like find Mickey Mouse's tea kettle and, help Sophia find her crown. It doesn't matter. My kids love these things. So, again, it's not necessarily about the words. There's so much more they can get from the book, just like nonverbal communication. All right, so these book handling skills, again, they need a lot of opportunities to interact with them. Don't just focus on your regular books. Get that fiction and the nonfiction, and make sure that you are incorporating books that reflect diversity and diverse cultures. You want books that represent the children you're caring for. So if you don't have a couple of books where the kids in the books look like them, you should really look out for that kind of material, because it's something they're going to be drawn to. Everybody wants to see someone like them represented in the books that they read and the toys that they play with. Okay, so here's some of those indicators. They're holding the book the right side up. They got the front cover on there. They know that the book has a title. They know that there's an author, that wrote it, and maybe an illustrator that drew it. They can identify where in the book to start. So we don't want to just open it up right to the middle, because we're going to miss a lot of information. And then, even more specifically, they start to understand that we read from the left to the right, and we start at the top and we work our way down. That's one of the reasons that when you're reading, following along with your finger helps them understand what's happening there. Now, a lot of people kind of have trouble incorporating specific reading time, and this was one of the ways that we were able to make it happen. Our youngest children, they're going to need nap time, but once they get to that age where they start dropping a nap, it hits hard on all of us. Let's be honest. We need that nap as much as they do. We need them to take that nap. However, when they get to the point where they're not going to be napping anymore, instead of fighting that battle, you can give them this illusion of choice and still get what you want while they feel like they have some control. So I always suggest to my providers to implement quiet time. So if your youngest children are sleeping, the older children are allowed to have quiet time. However, they have to be laying down on their nap mat, and they need to be looking through books. They can choose, let's say, 2 different books, and they have to be reading silently. So a lot of times they're willing to accept that if that means they don't have to nap. So it's one of those things where it's a win-win, because in the end, they're getting literacy and you're getting quiet. And just some more pictures of adorable children reading books together. It's one of those things that sometimes they want to do it by themselves, but sometimes they're more willing to look through it with a friend. So don't be afraid to embrace that. Be flexible. Do what you've got to do to make it work. Okay, phonological awareness. Now, this is one that I know is going to sound a little bit intimidating. However, it's basically this idea that we're playing with the sounds that are happening in language. So kids start to develop this awareness that language is broken into words, and then those words are broken into syllables, and then even smaller than that are these little sounds that make up those syllables. Those are called phonemes. Now, children don't necessarily need to know that it's called a phoneme, but it's more about them learning to hear and discriminate between those sounds in the words. A lot of a lot of times we do this through things like rhymes and alliteration, experimenting with, beginning and ending sounds, being able to tell the difference between sounds that are different. So, sounds that an animal might make versus sounds that you might hear in a city. They're able to start picking up eventually on rhyming words, and then even further to start producing their own rhyming words. My girls love to play the rhyming game. I like to use these kind of verbal time wasters when we're driving in the car, because I don't do electronics or videos in the car, so I have to keep them occupied, usually through conversation. So we try to find ways to make that conversation meaningful, and a lot of times we play the rhyming game where one of us thinks of a word and then we continue to give rhyming words until we run out. So, fat, cat, mat, sat, and they're going to come up with things like plat, and that's totally fine. Zat, jat, none of it doesn't matter if it's a real word or not, because what they're learning from it is exactly what we want them to learn. They're learning that this is how I make a word rhyme. So this turns into them having awareness of, separate words in a sentence, and then again that those words are broken into those syllables, and then we come to this thing called onset and rhyme. This is a little bit more high level, but it's just this idea of combining those sounds to make a word. So if I have b and at, and I go b at bat, it's just the idea that we put those sounds together to create an entire word. So one of the ways you can experiment with sounds and language, other than the rhyming game, do things with like predictable, repeated text and language. Things like 10 in the bed. 10 in the bed, and the little one said, roll over, roll over. So they all rolled over and one fell out. Things like that. There's a reason that they've been around for a very, very long time. Alphabet, like zoophonics songs, A is for alligator, alligator. That right there is that onset and rhyme. It's just demonstrated a little bit differently. It's kind of hidden in a playful song. Tongue twisters, and those kind of experiment with alliteration, which is that repeated sound. So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. That sound that you're hearing in there, that's the alliteration. Kids like this kind of stuff. And we already talked about rhyming words, but there it is again. And then, songs that play with word sounds. For example, and I cannot for the life of me, I don't know if this is the name of it, but that name song, Kelly, Kelly, Bobelli, Banana, Fana, Fofelli, Me, My, Momelli, Kelly. So, I only sing for you guys, just so you know. This is, well, you guys and my kids, basically. Don't tell anyone I sang. But that's a song right there that kids love. It's about them, and it's silly, and it plays with language and sounds. All right. Concept 4, alphabet knowledge. Now, before I even get past this slide here, I need you to understand, just like these children are not going to be reading, okay, they're not going to know the entire alphabet. There is an entire process that needs to happen, and it takes a long time, and some kids are going to pick up right away. My oldest daughter, she picked up her letters and sounds by 2, and she did it on her own. I'm not even kidding. It blew my mind. My youngest, she's 4, and she is well, I would say 4, almost 5. And she is just now getting to the point where she is consistently recognizing these letters. She's consistently making the correct sounds. She's able to kind of operate independently now when it comes to letters. But it was a very, very different process for her. That does not mean that she is behind. My other one was just way ahead of the curve. Okay, so have a realistic expectation. This is not, it's not going to happen right away. It takes a while. So it involves, again, more than just, that letter right there is a J and that letter right there is an X. They have to kind of start to understand that the alphabet is like, it's a system, and then those letters are going to fit together to create these words. Again, lots of repeated interactions with written words and letters. You're probably noticing that that's coming up a lot. Again, the more we expose them to this stuff throughout our daily routines and play, you're going to it just happens organically, innately, just through what you're already doing. And then that very bottom one there, just again, I want to emphasize this. Children begin to recognize some printed letters. Some. Okay? Not all. And it says especially those found in their own name. Again, because kids care about things that are important to them, like their name. Okay. Other indicators here we've got, they can tell the difference between letters and shapes and symbols. That's one way that I knew at 2 that Amelia started to recognize letters, because I realized she was pointing to letters instead of the numbers and shapes on this playmat that we had. They start to recognize similarity and differences in letters. They obviously begin to get better and better as time goes on, but some kids, if they're not ready, you just got to keep giving them new experiences in a lot of different materials. So don't just think it's looking at flashcards or a poster. We use Play-Doh, blocks, marker and papers. We create the shapes with our bodies. Like, there's so many ways to do letters that doesn't involve flashcards and posters. And then they, as they start recognizing these letters, they're also going to be starting to make the connection of their sound. But that, again, happens quite a bit later for many children. So they might know that it's a letter B, but they just aren't understanding that that letter B has a sound. And then you bring into account the fact that, letters have a capital and a lowercase letter. It's a lot for them to learn. This is some of my children that I cared for, and we used what was called their special letter. The very, very, very first letter that I taught them, and that I taught like the entire group, I taught them their special letters. So here we have Cora, and her special letter is C. And then we've got Nasir, and his special letter is N. So I would always focus on their special letter and their name. There is no point in Cora needing to know the letter M. She doesn't need it. She doesn't need a Z, and neither does Nasir. Okay, there's no point in stuffing those other letters down their throat. If they can't recognize the letters of their name first, and they can't realize the sounds that those letters make, you don't need to worry about the other ones yet. So you're going to start to see a bunch of pictures because, again, repeated experiences. So here we go. We found a lot of ways to build their special letters. So you can see I've got some little manipulatives here, and he's got an N for himself. Amelia was working on an A. You can see it's kind of shaped like a Y, but we were getting there. We've got an H there for a Hadley. We focused on this for a very, very long time. I did a lot with name cards, like just like if they'd go to school, they'd have a name tag. You have that out constantly as something that they use to show where they sit in the classroom. And then we would use that over and over in hundreds of different ways, helping them create those letters of their name. And we did it with every different material you could think of. So there they are. They're doing those letters right there. The nice thing about this is that it's not just about letters. They're getting that fine motor. These here are wiki sticks, so they're like a sticky wax string. So it's giving them sensory experiences. Again, that's what play-based learning is all about. Like, I'm setting them up with an activity that provides a variety of things. Here they are using spoons that have letters of their name written on them. And after a while, they were able to take those spoons and put them in the proper order. That was a big deal when we hit that point. And then they got to the point where they could use the spoon to find its matching letter in the bucket. And some of them, I kept their letter as lowercase because these were lowercase beads. My daughter here was a little bit more advanced, so sometimes I would write it in uppercase and she would match its lowercase letter. You just tailor the activity to where your children are at. Again, more ways to build their names. We used magnets here. When you get to the point where you're ready to start incorporating other things from the alphabet, those other letters, we did have things like posters, but we used them differently. We tried to bring them into a hands-on experience. So here there were letters of all shapes and kinds in a tub, like a sensory tub, and then I gave them those tweezers, and they would pick the letter up on one side of the room, and they would hop or walk or crawl it back across the room to get some gross motor, and then they would match it up on the poster. This took a long time to get to this point. Don't expect, if you've never done this kind of thing, that they're ready for this. This was like year, I don't even know, 2.5 before we could do this. So the same way that you focused on their name, you do the same, but now we expand it into those other letters. And I always took the opportunity to have letters everywhere. If you've got an ugly brick wall behind your house like I do, grab some chalk and make it beautiful. And I'll tell you what, it lasts a lot longer than you would think. So again, same activity, but now we're expanding into letters that are not in their name. And there's Nasir. The first time he had made an N because it was important to him. It was his special letter. Here they are making an M because the letter of the day, I chose M. I have no idea why, whatever the reason was. And then also just embracing ways to make letters with manipulatives in tons of different ways. So here I'm using some different letter builders, and there are tons of sets that are letter building sets. However, you can find the same kinds of material for much cheaper if you just get a building set and not a letter building set. Exact same material, different name on the box. They can both do the same thing, but you're going to spend way less. Just a little pro tip. Alright, so here I'm using, looks like colored pattern tiles, and I was teaching them looks like the letter of the day was T. So here I am, they're making it with manipulatives. I'm not concerned about whether they can write that letter because that's not the point we're at yet. Another variation on sensory tubs and letters. Here I did individual ones because, sometimes kids aren't great at sharing. So I made individual letter tubs, and this was that initial, very first activity that they did coming into the day. And this became something that they looked forward to as well as I did, because I didn't have to worry about what they were going to do. And there's just some more examples. You can see I literally just took a puzzle and dumped it in a button and lentil tub. Use what you got. And use it in different ways. So remember those letters from earlier where they were using the spoons. You can see Hadley, she was one of our youngest kids. She's doing that same activity now. However, Nasir's using an alphabet necklace. And just using it to play with. So there was no, he could make his name, but really I just wanted him to play with letters that day. So there's a lot of ways to use the same thing, but to use it differently. All right, and then concept 5. This is our last concept here, so hang in there, guys. Comprehension and text structure. So this is starting to happen at the point where, like, we are reading stories to the kids and they're thinking about what is actually happening in the story, not the words on the page, but what actually happened at the beginning, in the middle, and the end. And it's all that storytelling aspect. Again, lots of opportunities to interact with the materials, reading every day. Again, I know that looks familiar, but it'll all be in the PowerPoint in your resources. And one thing I did want to mention there, here, they're going to make sense of these stories by drawing on that background knowledge. So all of those experiences that we talked about in the second video there, where we are providing them with unique experiences, that's the background knowledge that they're now drawing on. That's the reason that we do all of these activities. That's the reason why taking them to the park is not a waste of time. That's the reason why letting them play with each other and talk to one another during dramatic play is not a waste of time. All of those things are being very, I guess, they're looked down on by people who don't know better. They don't understand the value of play at this age. One thing I loved about puppets is that it kind of is just a natural storytelling tool for you, because when they're doing little puppet shows for each other, they have a story in mind. They're not just acting randomly. It's the king has a queen, and the queen has a baby, and then an evil fish comes along and he tries to steal the baby. There's this whole development of the character that happens. There's this whole world that they're creating with these puppets, and it's a pretty beautiful thing. So one of the ways to kind of keep kids on track with this, just keep them engaged when you're reading. That's one of the reasons I said you don't actually have to be reading the words on the page, because you should be interacting with the kids, asking them questions, having them make predictions about what's going to come next, asking how they felt at the end. Did they have an opinion about it? That's kind of ways that they make the reading more tangible to them, that it becomes more important. They start to understand the difference between fiction and nonfiction, real and fake. They can look at a book about cats and understand that it's a book about cats. They can start to retell things in order. I'm pretty sure that the pout-pout fish was kind of like telling a story in order. These are things that we're doing because of those constant, repeated experiences. And one thing I always like to do was some kind of art every day. Whatever you've read that day is a great thing to implement in your art. So here we've got a little chicka chicka boom boom. They're doing some artwork. I just gave them a bunch of random, dot markers and letter stickers, and off they go. And that actually aids that comprehension for them as well. Like the 5 little speckled frogs. We did finger plays one day, and 5 little speckled frogs song, and then we did some artwork, and they actually had to cut out the shape of each of those eyes and ears and the tongue. I taught them how to curl up the tongue. We used packing peanuts to stamp all those little flies that they were eating. It was just kind of a way to bring more life to the story. So, we made it. Make sure that you have commented and shared your thoughts on this post. Again, just some ideas for what you're going to do to encourage more literacy in the children that you are caring for. So make sure you've commented on our post. And then our very last video coming up next is going to be strand number 4. That's emergent writing, and that will be our last one.